Conquered by Alexander, overrun by the armies of Islam, ruled by Turkish sultans, burned by the Mongols, and every single time the conqueror vanished and Persia remained. For 25 centuries, the greatest empires on earth have swallowed this land whole, and every time the land quietly swallowed them back. This is the story of the empire no one could ever truly conquer. There is a plateau between the mountains and the sea where empires go to die, not to be destroyed on the battlefield. Many of them win the battle. They take the cities, they burn the palaces, they plant their flags on the ruins and declare the old world finished. And then slowly, something strange begins to happen. The conqueror starts to dress like the conquered. He speaks their language at his court. He marries their daughters, copies their laws, and rebuilds his kingdom in the shape of their old ideas. Until a generation later, his own grandchildren are, for every purpose that matters, Persian. This has happened not once, but again and again for 2,500 years. Greeks, Arabs, Turks, Mongols. The mightiest war machines in human history have marched onto the Iranian plateau, certain they were writing its final chapter. Each of them became a chapter in its story instead. In our own age, the great powers still circle this same plateau, still convinced it can be pressured, contained, or broken from the outside. History offers them a quiet warning. Because Persia has a secret, a kind of gravity that no army has ever escaped. This is the story of the empire that could be beaten, occupied and burned, and could never ever be conquered, and of the mystery at the heart of why. To understand the mystery, you have to see the pattern. Most civilizations die once. Egypt of the pharaohs became Greek, then Roman, then Arab, and the old world of the pyramids simply ended. Babylon fell and never rose again. Rome collapsed into fragments that forgot they had ever been one. But Persia does something no other ancient civilization has managed. It dies, and it comes back, as itself. The same plateau, the same language reborn, the same idea of kingship, the same poetry, stretching in an unbroken thread from the 6th century before Christ to the nation we now call Iran. No other country on earth has carried a single continuous identity for so long. Conquerors keep arriving, drawn by its wealth and its position at the crossroads of the world. And each believes he is the one who will finally erase it. And here is the pattern that should not be possible. The stronger the conqueror, the more completely Persia absorbs him. It does not resist by walls or by armies alone. It resists by transforming whoever wins. To rule Persia, you must first become a little Persian. And the moment you do, you have already lost. This is not a legend. It is written across 25 centuries, empire after empire. So how does a conquered people keep swallowing its conquerors? The story begins with a vassal who refused to stay one. 26 centuries ago, the people we call the Persians are a minor tribe on the southern plateau, subjects of a larger power, the Medes, who are themselves throwing off the empire of Assyria. Then, around 550 years before Christ, a single man rewrites the map of the world. His name is Cyrus. In barely 20 years, he overthrows the Medes, conquers wealthy Lydia and its legendary king Croesus, and takes Babylon itself, the greatest city on earth, reportedly without a battle. From a cluster of tribes, he forges the largest empire the planet has ever seen, reaching from the edge of India to the shores of the Aegean. But conquest is common. Empires are won and lost in every age. What makes Cyrus different is what he does with victory. He does not raise the peoples he takes. He frees the nations Babylon had enslaved, including, the Bible records, the exiled Jews, whom he sends home to rebuild their temple. He honors local gods, keeps local laws, and rules through local elites. He invents a new kind of empire, one held together not by terror, but by tolerance. And that invention becomes Persia's deepest weapon. Cyrus and his heirs build something the world has never seen. A machine for ruling many peoples as one. They divide the empire into provinces called satrapies, each with its own governor. But they let a Babylonian stay Babylonian and an Egyptian stay Egyptian, so long as the tribute flows and the king is honored. They cut the royal road, a highway running 1,500 miles across the empire, with fresh horses waiting in stations along its length, so a message can cross the known world in a week. They mint coins, standardize weights, and carve their vision of kingship into a cliff face at Behistun and into the soaring stone columns of a ceremonial capital, Persepolis, where sculpted delegations from every nation climb the great stairs bearing gifts to the King of Kings. This is the template, a single civilization made of many, refined, ordered, and tolerant, ruled by a just king at its center. And it is so effective, so seductive, that for the next 2,000 years, nearly every conqueror who takes Persia will reach for this very same model. They believe they are replacing it, they are only inheriting it. 2 centuries later comes the first conqueror history calls great. In 3 shattering battles, a young Macedonian king named Alexander destroys the Persian army, chases the last Achaemenid emperor to his death, and burns the palace of Persepolis to the ground, an act, some say, he regretted before the ashes were cold. On paper, Persia is finished. A conqueror from Europe has crushed the greatest empire on earth. And then the strangest thing happens. Alexander begins to dress in Persian robes. He adopts the Persian court ceremony as his own, asks his men to bow before him in the Persian manner, and marries a Persian noblewoman. At a single mass wedding, he weds 10,000 of his soldiers to Persian and Iranian brides, deliberately fusing the two peoples into one. His own Macedonians are appalled. They accuse their king of going native, of becoming the very thing he had conquered. And they are right. Alexander did not turn Persia into Greece. Persia was turning Alexander into a Persian king. He dies young, his empire splinters among his generals, and the Greek dynasty that inherits Iran slowly loses its grip on the plateau. Within a century, from the east, the old world begins to rise again. Out of the northeastern steppes ride the Parthians, horse archers who peel Iran away from its Greek rulers and rebuild a Persian empire in all but name. For centuries they hold the plateau, and they become the one wall Rome can never break. Legion after legion marches east. At Carrhae, an entire Roman army is annihilated and its general killed. The captured standards a wound Rome will remember for generations. Then, around the 3rd century after Christ, a new dynasty seizes the throne and does something deliberate and conscious. The Sasanians declare themselves the true heirs of Cyrus. They revive the ancient faith of Zoroaster as a state religion, gather the old scriptures, restore Persian as the language of power, and raise a capital at Ctesiphon, whose vast brick arch still stands, the largest single-span vault of the ancient world. For 400 years, the Sasanian Empire stands as Rome's equal. 2 superpowers locked along a single border, trading captured emperors, neither able to destroy the other. Persia has not merely survived the Greek conquest, it has answered it and rebuilt itself grander than before. And it believes itself eternal. Then, from an unexpected desert, comes the blow that should have ended everything. In the 7th century, out of Arabia, a new faith explodes across the world with stunning speed. Islam. Its armies meet the exhausted Sasanian Empire, worn down by decades of war with Rome. And in two decisive battles, they break it. The last Persian emperor flees east across his own collapsing realm and is murdered by a miller who does not even know who he is. The Zoroastrian fire temples fall silent. The empire of Cyrus, after 1200 years, is gone. And this time, it looks final. Persia is absorbed into a vast Arab caliphate ruled from distant Damascus. Its rulers are foreign, its new religion is foreign, and Arabic, not Persian, becomes the language of God, of law, and of prestige. For a century, the Persian language nearly disappears from writing altogether, surviving only in speech, in the mouths of villagers and grandmothers. Every previous conquest had left the Persian state standing. This one dissolves it completely. By every measure that had ever mattered, Persia has finally died. And yet, buried inside that defeat, the oldest pattern of all begins quietly to turn once more. Because the conquered do not stay silent. Persian scribes, Persian administrators, Persian thinkers pour into the new empire, and they discover that the Arabs need them. No one else knows how to run a bureaucracy, tax a province, or govern a world. When the caliphate's center shifts east to a new city called Baghdad, its viziers, its administrators, and its very model of kingship are Persian to the core. The dazzling Islamic golden age that follows, its astronomers, its physicians, the mathematicians who hand us algebra, is built in enormous part by Persian minds. And then the language itself refuses to die. A new form of Persian rises, written in Arabic script but unmistakably its own. And around the year 1000, a single poet spends more than 30 years composing an epic of 60,000 verses, the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, retelling the entire mythic history of Iran, from the creation of the world to the last Persian emperor, in almost pure Persian, reaching back past the conquest as if it had never happened. His name is Ferdowsi, and his book does what no army could. It hands a conquered people its memory back. Persia had lost its empire. Through a poem, it kept its soul. The next wave comes not from a desert, but from the endless grasslands of the north. Turkic nomads, raised in the saddle, warriors without equal, sweep down onto the plateau and seize it by the sword. The Seljuk Turks carve out an empire stretching from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. Once again, Persia is ruled by outsiders, steppe horsemen who speak a wholly different tongue and owe nothing to the old Iranian world. And once again, the pattern closes over them like water over a stone. To govern their enormous conquest, the Turks turn to a Persian statesman, Nizam al-Mulk, whose book on the art of kingship becomes the manual of Islamic rule for centuries. They make Persian the language of their court, their poetry, and their administration. They pour patronage on Persian artists and scholars. The Turkic sultans keep the sword, the Persians keep the pen, and it is the pen that shapes the empire. The conquerors have signed their names in Persian ink, and a new phrase begins to describe what is happening. Not the Persian Empire, but the Persianate world. A civilization now so powerful, it no longer even needs a Persian on the throne in order to spread. If a civilization can survive being conquered this many times, what else has history gotten wrong about who really wins? Subscribe and follow the mystery, because the strangest conquest of all is still to come. Nothing in Persia's long memory prepares it for what comes out of the east in the 13th century. The Mongols. Under Genghis Khan and his heirs, they descend on the Iranian plateau with a fury that has no precedent. Whole cities erased, their populations slaughtered. Ancient centers of learning turned to ash and bone. Some regions will not recover their numbers for centuries. It is, by almost any measure, the worst catastrophe in Persian history. And in the middle of that storm stands one of the strangest powers the medieval world ever knew, the Order of Alamut. High in the mountains north of the plateau, in a fortress perched on a needle of rock men called the Eagle's Nest, a secretive Ismaili sect had held out for 160 years. Their founder, Hassan-i Sabah, had built a chain of impregnable castles and a discipline of devoted followers so feared that crusaders and sultans alike whispered their name, the Assassins. Legend said their master, the Old Man of the Mountain, could send a single silent killer to reach any ruler in his own bedchamber. No army had ever taken Alamut. The Mongols took it. They dragged the last Grandmaster down from his eagle's nest, extinguished the order, and burned its fabled library, its secrets lost forever. Persia's mightiest fortress and its most terrifying empire had both fallen in a single generation. Surely now the pattern was broken. It was not. Within 2 generations, the impossible happens again, this time to the Mongols themselves. The grandsons of the men who had drowned Persia in blood settle down to rule it, and Persia goes quietly to work on them. Their Khans take Persian ministers, fund Persian historians, and build in the Persian style. In the year 1295, the Mongol ruler of Iran, Ghazan Khan, converts to Islam and reigns as a Persian-styled king. His court a monument to the very culture his ancestors had tried to annihilate. The destroyers have become just another dynasty of the plateau. And now the Persianate world reaches its astonishing height. Persian becomes the language of courts and poetry across half of Asia, the official tongue of Muslim India for centuries, the language of refinement in the Ottoman court, the speech of learning from the Balkans to the borders of China. The Taj Mahal itself would one day be raised by a dynasty that wrote its poetry in Persian and traced its ideal of kingship straight back to Cyrus. Persia had lost war after war, and yet its language, its art, and its vision of the just king now ruled a stretch of the world no army of Cyrus had ever dreamed of touching. Defeat, once again, had become a kind of empire. By the 16th century, the plateau has been ruled by outsiders for the better part of 900 years, Arab, Turkic, Mongol. And then it forges itself anew. A teenage warrior mystic named Ismail, heir to a militant order, sweeps across Iran and crowns himself Shah. In a single, deliberate stroke, he makes one particular branch of Islam, Twelver Shi'ism, the state religion of his realm, setting Iran apart from the great Sunni empires that surround it, and binding the plateau together with a shared and distinct identity. The Safavid dynasty he founds achieves what no one had managed for 9 centuries. It reunites the whole of Iran under a native Persian throne. Its capital, Isfahan, becomes one of the most beautiful cities on earth, its great square and blue-tiled domes drawing awe from every traveler who sees them, a place they said was half the world. A modern nation is being born. The borders, the faith, and the fierce sense of a separate Iranian self that endures into our own century, much of it is set right here. After 2,100 years of conquest and rebirth, Persia has finally become something that can never again be dissolved. Because it is no longer only an empire, it has become a nation. So what is the secret? Why does this one civilization, alone among all the ancients, keep rising from its own ruins, wearing its own face? Part of the answer is geography, a high plateau ringed by mountains and desert. easy to invade but almost impossible to hold, a place that exhausts every occupier. Part of it is administration. For 25 centuries, Persia has known how to run an empire better than the men who conquer it, making itself indispensable to every new master. But the deepest part is something harder to name. Call it a gravity. Persia perfected very early an idea of civilization so complete, its poetry, its art, its vision of the just and glorious king, that conquerors did not merely defeat it, they fell in love with it. To rule Persia was to be seduced by Persia. The Greek wore its robes, the Arab wrote its bureaucracy, the Turk spoke its verse, the Mongol funded its historians. Every sword that came to cut Persia down became in the end another hand carrying it forward. That is the mystery the plateau has kept for 2,500 years. You cannot conquer a civilization that conquers you back. The armies came from every direction in every century, each certain it had found the empire's ending. Every one of them became a line in its story instead. The names of the powers that circle the plateau change with each age. Athens and Sparta, Rome, the Caliphate, the empires of our own time. The plateau remains itself. So here is the question I leave you with. In an age of satellites and superpowers, does the old pattern still hold? Can a civilization this old still absorb whatever comes for it? Or has the world finally changed the rules? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more of the mysteries history left unsolved, subscribe to Scrolls Untold. A new short every day, and the full story every Sunday. The past is far stranger than they ever taught us.